Thank you for being back. And we are ahead of a very exciting panel. And right after this panel, we will have a lunch break. 20 to 1 is the time when it will begin. So we certainly have 1.5 hours. So once again, let me welcome you respectfully and cordially. And the title of our second panel is Breaking Through Barriers and Promoting Children's Rights, but we can also say that it is the promotion of children's rights with the help of intersectionality, because there are a number of disadvantages and special mutual influences at play here, and these are the phenomena that are called as intersectionality. And this has relevance for our panel because we will discuss the right to education of Roma children and the institutional placement of children with disabilities. And we will also discuss the inclusive care to be provided to children who have been lifted out of their families in a way that will promote their self-confidence. And as I have said, children's rights are evolving on a continuous basis, and there is this intersection between the protection of the environment. The climate crisis is what it has culminated into, and which has been in focus at many other places. So the first topic was the situation in the education system of the Roma children, of which Ágnes Kende will now hold a presentation presenting the most recent research results. I am kindly asking you to respect your 15 minutes so that we can also take audience questions. And let me also introduce our speakers. First, Ágnes Kende has earned her MA from sociology in 1995. And she's working as an expert at the CEU Center for Democracy Institute. Is also a very active member of the Children's Rights NGO Coalition. She has participated in numerous project evaluations and English and Hungarian language projects concerning issues of the situation of the Roma people, local programs against child poverty, housing poverty, and the impact of programs financed by the European Union on Roma integration. And she has been a regular contributor to the Quibit journal. And just a few thoughts on the topic by way of introduction, and then I will pass the floor to Ágnes Kende, whose introductory presentation will focus on the educational situation in Hungary of the Roma children with special needs. So this is a very intriguing area, and we have talked a lot about integration and inclusive education, and the two are often mixed, although the two are not the same, because inclusive education is representing a much higher level. Often we say that integration is taking place, has taken place, but of course, with what success from the perspective of Roma children can still be a dilemma. And we have also covered to what extent integration is advantageous for children with special needs or children with ordinary needs. And in 2013, the European Human Rights Court, in the case Horvat contra Hungary, adopted a ruling arguing that the problem is systemic, at a systemic level. And through the forthcoming presentation, we will gain insight into a truly valuable research project. And the question that we will try to wrap our heads around is whether the schools have been capable successfully to accommodate to the needs of these children with special needs or not. And there is another question, whether the diagnostic process provides an opportunity for subjectively assessing the situation, as a result of which, of course, an erroneous diagnosis will be made. Thank you very much. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for the kind introduction. And before I start, let me say that Adil Kegye is here with us, and she is the lawyer. I am the sociologist, and the two of us did it together. So I did do a test this morning, and it was a bit longer than 15 minutes, so I will have to rush. So this is a very young audience, so therefore few of you might know that 20 years ago this was a serious problem to qualify Roma children as people with disabilities. But a lot of changes have taken place over the past 20 years, which made many of us believe that the problem is no longer there. But we dusted the story off and took a closer look at the situation to find out what the as-is situation is. Roma children are being educated in a segregated way in Hungary, and there is nothing new about that. However, church schools have been mainly blamed for this in the past 15 years. But now we have realized that we have very little knowledge about the situation, and we wanted to find an answer to the question of whether there still are children who have been qualified as people with special needs is unjustly, especially in segregated schools. So people who are qualified as young people with special needs might have certain learning difficulties to different extents. And the special committees may decide to put them into special needs classes in ordinary schools, or they can also be condemned to integrated education, so to say, meaning that this is a class with a normal teaching program, but due to the special needs, theoretically, they will receive some assistance from a specialized teacher. And just one remark, for this situation, Hungary has been condemned at different forums, and the argument was that SNE special needs children are not being integrated. So we have to understand the broader picture. Schools are working in a dysfunctional manner in Hungary from many different perspectives, and this is bad for most children. But the more vulnerable young people are, especially if they are disadvantaged, and especially if they also belong to the Roma community, there will be an aggregate effect. So there is a cold integration or seeming or apparent integration, just to name a few of the terms that are being used. But in practice, it means that a child with special needs is set in a normal, ordinary class without special assistance. Their frustration will only accumulate. But the solution is not to put them into a special school. The solution should be to provide them with the right assistance. But Roma integration is a special matter. Generally, what is happening is that normal schools with a normal curriculum, well, we are seeing that schools are segregated entirely, but this is happening not only in rural Hungary, but also in bigger cities. But due to the right to free school choice, parents tend towards schools that are better without, meaning that there are no children with special needs, and the teaching quality is generally higher in these schools as well. As you can see, that the point of this slide is that we have more or less some information about the situation, but even this rudimentary report is proving that Roma children tend to be in special needs schools rather than in ordinary schools. And we have had a last bench program, that was the name, and we also saw the modification of diagnostics processes. So we have had these projects, but I'm still saying that IQ tests are not entirely independent of the background culture, but such earlier methods certainly set the course and marginal parents' children generally tended to fail in these aptitude tests or IQ tests. And seeing this, we decided to introduce a different type of test to indicate what really there is in the child, separating the child from the societal background that they are coming from. And Erika already mentioned that we also had issues with spaces on which Hungary has been condemned. And I've just mentioned this last bench program, and that was introduced by the liberal government prior to the current Fidesz government. And the IQ degree was set above which nobody could be qualified as special needs. So we were hoping that the problem will actually disappear. But what exactly happened? Well, we realized that the problem is still there. We conducted a project and we were suffering with the data, so to say, because it was a real challenge to obtain data about the Roma children. And we do know something of the output of integrated education because it's very objective who is put into what school. And we also know something about children from ordinary backgrounds and children from disadvantaged background. But of course, this was voluntary data provision, which was only sufficient for us to see the trends. In 2 settlements, we did what is called deep drilling. And not only did we identify the problems, but we have even been confronted with new ones. And eventually we conducted a questionnaire interview with the involvement of 200 parents. And the interview was made by local Roma people. And these interviewers reported to us about the conditions in which they made those interviews. So that was also very valuable. Today, it's very challenging to do such a research in state institutions because NGOs are not welcome. So we had to use a lot of tricks, as a result of which we found our way to special need teachers working at kindergartens, working at government offices or municipality institutions, and some of them were prepared to stand up for what they saw in the system and speak frankly about it. I know that this is too complicated a slide, but let me highlight that even from the data, it became obvious that the schools where the Roma children represent a ratio of 50 to 75%, meaning that they are quite segregated, however, where the chance is still there to reverse the process. So that's exactly where schools tend to put children into special classes. And we don't know if they are Roma or not, but given the fact that the ratio is 75%, we are assuming that these are Roma children. But however, where this ratio is 10%, the total is only 4%, whereas in total, the SN special needs children represent 5 to 9% of the school population. So this is another favorite chart of mine, and I know that it is difficult to read, so I will give you a verbal explanation. In the county of Borsod, Abaúj, and Zemplén, which I put at the beginning at the top of my list, because there, even in ordinary schools, we have a lot of children coming from disadvantaged background, and some estimations say that over 50% are Roma children, so the difference is no more than 3% between the difference is between the aggregate disadvantaged children and normal, ordinary disadvantaged children. So there is no need for them to be put into segregated schools because segregation is happening in ordinary schools already. And we also interviewed parents, and it turns out that they are not aware of their children's status. They are not given an opportunity to help their children develop. They don't have access to experts who would in a handheld way bring them through this process. And we also concluded that wherever there is a segregated school, people do not even bother whether they should just be put in the class of SNE children, and parents are not even aware of any subsidies that are available to them to help their children. cover travel expenses. I know that I only have a couple of minutes left, and in the whole system, there is this triple trick. Several experts have concluded that these children do not have learning difficulties, but they do not have the appropriate vocabulary. And it's not their language skills that are missing, but it is the words that they have never learned. So it is up to the teachers who sometimes make the decision that, all right, this child does not have the vocabulary, but I can see that he or she is all right. But it's up to the teacher, and the experts are perplexed because they see that there is no learning difficulty, but these children still cannot be allowed to attend ordinary schools because it's going to be a bloodbath in their case. And in actual fact, the experts have confirmed that even though the children are experiencing difficulties, they would be fully fit for integrated education. But it's the integrated education that is not fit to deal with these children, so they are put into segregated school where there are no places enough, so they are put back to the ordinary schools where the teachers think that their rightful place is in the segregated schools. So this is a triple trick, as I've said. And many of the experts underline that Roma children never get to the point of being diagnosed as ADHD deficit children because generally they give such a bad impression that they appear to be children with learning disabilities. So they have these labels, dyslexia, dyscalculia, etc., and the Roma children are still being overrepresented in the category of children with learning difficulties. So here I'm just pointing out the fact that there are alternative devices available, methods available. Art could be used as a means to assess the skills and aptitudes that they do have. And teachers are badly in need of some kind of a training whereby they will be able to provide the right attention to these children. So we have to change and reform the educational courses that are offered to, the teacher colleges. Courses must be changed. So generally, the conclusion is that ethnicity data should be collected more regularly. The legal conditions are there which could facilitate that process. The second conclusion is that parents should be much better involved into these processes, and experts should also be provided with special training so that they understand what these children are going through. And at the systemic level, the conditions should be created for this kind of integrated education. This was breathtaking, Ágnes. Thank you very much. And your essential conclusion, I believe, is that there is a lot of subjectivity in the system. And the big dilemma that we are faced with is how to eradicate that aspect. And now let me introduce the next speaker. And the title of the
our child participant, Nori, who is a student at a bilingual secondary school. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And please feel free to make your remarks after each and every presentation if you have a message that you want to share with the audience. And well, you can also participate in the discussion after the presentations, of course. Our next topic will be the situation of children with disabilities. This presentation will be delivered by Mr. Sándor Gurbai, who is Impact Manager for Validity Foundation, deals with the human rights protection for persons with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities at European and international levels. I think he has made great progress in this regard. There were many lawsuits that have been closed successfully where people with disabilities won. Sándor is a lawyer, holds a PhD from Pázmány Péter Catholic University. Well, I want to ask him to share his views on, well, whether he sees any paradigm shift as a result of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, whether the Hungarian society became more prejudiced or more accepting. In 2022, we had a research when the public turned out to be more accepting, especially to children, but based on the census in 2011, about 490,000 people declared themselves to be people with disabilities. In 2022, 273,000 people declared themselves as people with disabilities. And it is concerning that over the past 20 years, there was a 40% increase in the number of children with special educational needs. And while the child protection system has its challenges, because based on statistical office data, 39% of children with disabilities live in care homes, and of all children under treatment, it is 27%. It has many reasons. Sándor will talk about changes in the legislative framework and its consequences. So I pass the floor to Sándor, who will talk about the institutionalization of children with disabilities. And well, we are looking forward to learning more about the inclusive care, inclusive education of children with disabilities in Hungary. Erika, thank you for the introduction. Well, responding to one of your questions, well, you asked whether the Hungarian society is more accepting or prejudiced. I think you are probably familiar with the abbreviation NIMBE, not in my backyard. Not in my backyard. I'm accepting, but I don't want to be these people in my backyard, in my neighborhood. So this is what acceptance means when we say that we are accepting in terms of people with disabilities or Roma children or Roma adults. So it is important to define what we mean by acceptance. In my presentation, I will focus on the institutional placement of children with disabilities, and I have two major topics to cover. One of is a recent change in domestic legislation, and the other one is a UN guideline from 2022 on that was adopted by the convention, by the Committee on the Rights of People with Disabilities. It is UN guidelines on their institutionalization. Or she mentioned a program, a university program here at ELTE, this child protection program. When I reviewed my slide, I found that there has been a change in legal regulation in the Child Protection Act. It is the Section 7.2 in the Child Protection Act that was changed, and it is about, well, its main message is that all children should be placed with a foster parent, all children below the age of 12, but it identified three exceptions to these rules. One, when a child is chronically ill, it is not mandatory to place such a child with a foster parent, and severely disabled children should not be placed with a foster parent. And if siblings can be placed together only at an institution, then the institution is a preference. Well, this permanently ill category under the UN Convention can be considered disability. So category A applies to children with disabilities. So if a child younger than 12 has a disability, then you should not necessarily place them with a foster parent, and you are allowed to place them in an institution. My next slide highlights this item A, because the legislator decided to repeal this section, and starting from July the 1st, this section A, this item A, has been repaired by the legislator. I wanted to know the reason why the legislator decided to do that, because we wanted to repeal this item for about a decade because it is strongly discriminative. I checked the legal regulation that provides the reasoning, that provides an explanation, the explanatory memorandum, and I found that this Act 30 of 2024, Section 38 of the explanatory memorandum of this law, included this text that we have on the slide. What is interesting in this explanation is that the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities published a report on Hungary in 2022, and in this report they called Hungary to repeal this section. And well, I was happy to read it because, well, it is good news, and then read on what else is included in this explanatory memorandum. I will refer back to this report, UN report later. So as this Section 38 goes on, so with this modification, with this amendment, more emphasis is given to the necessity of placing children, removing from their family with a substitute care and place them with foster parents. Well, this is the end of the explanatory memorandum. So the amendment places even greater emphasis on the priority of family placement for children who are deprived of their family. And I was also interested to find out whether the Hungarian government provided any funding for placing children with foster parents. And I asked some colleagues who have decades of experience in this field, who are consulted by the government, and I heard that they know no funding. They know of no funding, so no financial resources are available by the government, from the government, to support the placement, the family placement of these children. Now, let me refer back to the report that is mentioned in the explanatory memorandum, the reason for repealing this section in the Child Protection Act. So this report was initiated by the Validity Foundation, and the committee, the Child Protection Committee, came to Hungary. They visited institutions, they consulted government representatives, and they then published this report, and they found that there are serious and system-level violations of rights in Hungary, including CRPD rights. In Section 9 of CRPD is strongly violated in Hungary. But the committee asked the government not only to repeal this provision, but it also said that it should develop a strategy to ensure the right of children with disabilities to family life, and they gave a guidance to the government to develop a schedule, to develop reference values that Nori mentioned in her presentation about the impact assessment. Well, in 10 years from now, we can make an impact assessment on what strategy was developed and how it was implemented. The government did not consider these guidelines when the Child Protection Act was amended. And a few pieces of statistics. In 2020, this UN investigation report was published, and it refers back to data from 2019, which declared that 33 of children living in institutional care were children with disabilities. So it was about a third of children living there. It is almost 6 times the percentage of the population with disability. I tried to get some more statistical figures. Some figures are available, but the Hintalavon Foundation had a report in 2023 that included some valuable data. Erika, you mentioned the number of children with special educational needs in childcare home, which was 39% in 2023. So this trend doesn't seem to be declining. So disabled children, children with disabilities, are often placed in institutions by the Hungarian government. The same report pointed out that in 2019, nearly 800 children with disabilities were placed in homes for people with disabilities, mainly adults. So it is also a trend in Hungary that children with disabilities are placed in institutions that are designed for adults, for caring for adults. And this was a shocking figure. 800 children were in this category in 2029. And I checked the reports by the Hintalavon Foundation to get some accurate data, and I found this list of figures. The CRPD committee mentioned this figure. They probably meant 2017 because 799 children lived in homes for people with disabilities in adult care. Then this figure keeps decreasing or kept decreasing until 2021, but it is still a significant number. In 2022, slightly more children lived in care homes for adults than a year before. And now I move on to my next topic, the UN guidelines on deinstitutionalization. What does deinstitutionalization mean in terms of children with disabilities and all children who live in institutional care? These guidelines provides provisions on children with disabilities. We mentioned the concept of intersectionality today, and these guidelines put a major emphasis on intersectionality. It has separate chapters on children, adults with disabilities, on women with disabilities, and the paragraphs 43 to 51 deal with children and adolescents with disabilities and their deinstitutionalization. And from section 12, I highlighted another excerpt. The message of this section is that all forms of institutionalization of children with disabilities, that is their placement is in non-family setting, are segregationist. So the committee says that there is no space for consideration whether it serves the interest of the child or not, while the Child Protection Act recommends that you should consider the child interest or the joint placement of siblings. The CRPD committee says that institutionalization is segregationist, harmful, and in violation of the convention. This sends a clear message to Hungary that if we place disabled children with disabilities in institutions, it is segregationist and violates the convention. And the second message is that from the child's perspective, any placement that is not family based is institutionalization. So when children are placed in institutions, in groups, in group homes, or for adults group homes or supported accommodation. So this committee defines institutions as any non-family based accommodation. And my last slide is citation that I want to read out. It is from a person with disabilities who lives in an institution. He said that the guardianship authorities decided that my mom and dad were not capable of raising me well, so they took me away. We had no clothes or food at home. They said my mom couldn't handle things. She had a guardian. That's why I was taken out of the family. My mother fought for me a lot. My other two brothers and sisters were adopted. The staff say things can't happen the way we, the residents, want in the institution. There is no point complaining because nothing will change anyway. If something would change, it would be a miracle. I'm afraid of the institution. Whatever we say, the institution won't admit when they are wrong, and it won't admit when we are right. Thank you. Thank you. And I think, well, it made it clear that it is not enough to have legislation in place, but you have to provide the resources, the human resources and other resources to promote inclusive education. The next presentation will be about the situation of children living in state care. Zsófi, the floor is yours. I'm a child with disabilities. I'm 18, so I may not be a child after all. I'm hard of hearing, and I have a gadget, a hearing aid, and I can live a full life with this. And I'm sure that if I were put in an institution, I wouldn't be able to sit here at this table and talk to you, but I could only use sign language, and I would be deprived of my family because they are not people with disabilities. They are perfectly ordinary people, and I'm very grateful that I was not institutionalized, but they raised me in a family setting, and it enables me to live a fuller life than as if I was raised in an institution. This is what I wanted to tell you. Thank you. Thank you. And well, sorry for not paying attention to you. Our next topic is the situation of children living in institutional care, especially when it is shared by a professional who is specialized in experiential pedagogy. About 21,000 children live in state care with foster parents, and when these children enter the system, they usually come from a family with their parents, the natural parents. Many of them have siblings who are already in care, and 1/3 of those entering the system were overaged, and about 10% of them had special education needs. Unfortunately, the number of children younger than 3 and babies is increasing, and it is a major challenge to provide care for children with disabilities, and the number of adolescents is also on the rise. Erik Szécsi will be the next speaker. The title of his presentation, The Child is a Whole World. He is head of Világszép Foundation. He's a psychologist and studied pedagogy. He deals with alternative educational methods, and he manages programs for children in care institutions, and he's in close cooperation with the Experiential Academy, and he works with international groups, Hungarian groups of various ages. We would like to answer him the questions about the needs of people. How can the needs of children in state care? These are traumatized children. Can you identify any improvement? Do these programs improve the self-confidence, and can these programs reduce the differences between children arising from their cultural and social background?
Sziasztok! Szécsi Erik vagyok, és
Hi, my name is Erik Szécsi, And I am an experiential learning trainer, so expect me to involve you in this presentation. First off, let me ask you to raise your hand. Raise your hand and say hello. 1, 2, 3. All right, it's starting. My next question is, or I'm asking you to raise your hand only if you are aware, more or less, of what is happening before a child is put into a care home. 1, 2, 3. All right? Just one last question. Raise your hand if you already have had the opportunity to meet someone who was raised in a child care institution. Say you talked 10 minutes for 10 minutes to such a person. So I also have other games that I have brought with me, but I only have 50 minutes, so I need to reduce the talking part. So please think about when you were a child, what was your favorite dish that you immediately wanted to have as soon as you got home? Remember, just remember, and if you do remember, raise your hand. And just one more request from me. Think about what happened to you when you arrived home from school. Who was the person to whom you turned when you had some emotional challenges or when you experienced, say, success at school and that you wanted to share your joy? Who was this person and why exactly did you choose that person to share your thoughts and emotions with? Just think it through in your minds. Remember this person and try to answer why exactly he or she. If you know the answer, raise your hand. All right? Just a brief definition of notions and thoughts and concepts as to what is happening to a young person before being put into a care institution. One is the warning signal system, meaning that if there is any kind of risk or threat in the life of a child, we have a warning system in place which will give off a signal. And then the child is enrolled into what is called the fundamental care system. Experts do their best to resolve the issues and to allow the child to stay in their family. But if it's not happening in the way they desire, then the child is lifted out of the family and the status is assessed, and either foster care families is where they end up or in a care institution. So as for our foundation, we are working with children who have been put into these care institutions, who have already gone through this process. And let me emphasize that in some cases, this process is not long at all. So if there is a threat or risk in the child's life that justifies this, the child is immediately removed from the family and put into some special care institution. But what is awaiting these young persons, young individuals in this fundamental care system? Currently, these homes are operated on the model of what is called in Hungarian family homes, meaning that in theory there is a 7-member strong expert panel which are providing for their needs 24 hours a day all through the week. And obviously, this would be all ideal if these 7-member panels were in place everywhere and would be receiving the appropriate and necessary background support. But in actual fact, these institutions are very often understaffed and they are lacking these experts, meaning that the existing ones have to work overtime and they are not only allocated to not allocated to particular groups, but they are being moved across the board wherever they need it, they are put there. But how is that related to the rights of children? Because there are some fundamental needs of every child that must be catered to. And these experts, I'm telling you, are doing their best to meet those needs in spite of the difficulties. But of course, due to the institutional framework, this is a huge challenge, and sometimes even the best experts cannot respond to the needs properly, because the children have physical needs, but I can tell you that most of those physical needs are properly catered to. So, they always have meals in adequate quality and quantity, but the second aspect is perhaps more questionable. So if there is a group of children of 12 and some children, have their favorite dishes or meals, then maybe they will have it on their birthdays, but it might happen that they are raised in such a way that they never, ever enjoy that favorite meal. So these are about the fundamental needs, that is healthcare and nutrition and shelter, a good bed, and, protection against the forces of nature. These are in place, I can tell you that, but it's not properly tailor-made to the needs of the individuals. So okay, but it still is there. But on the other hand, the emotional needs represent a much bigger challenge. Acceptance, safety, security, love is what every child needs, and the provision of these qualities is very challenging under the present circumstances. The composition of the teams is changing all the time, and when a new institution is launched, some experts prefer to work for those, and maybe a child has grown accustomed to a particular individual and have developed a certain emotional attachment to over the past 3 weeks or 3 years. It may happen that that person is no longer there when the child gets home to the care institution from school, because there is such a turnover of experts. So we have our own foundation, and it's called Világszép, meaning the beauty of the world in English, and we are dedicated to developing children as early on as possible and making their lives outside school as beautiful as possible. And we are engaging with 5 children care institutes on the Buda side, on the western side of Budapest, and we would like to follow our children and help and support our young individuals all through their lives. So we are offering programs all through their lifespan, and we start with kindergarten age when we have experts dedicated to their development. And we have voluntary storytellers who attend once a week these children's care institutions, and we have a special night when we read out fairy tales to them. And in addition, we also have a mentorship program. We have an expert employed by our foundation, and we allocate such mentors to young children with special needs, and we want to make sure that a particular adult can develop a long-term relationship with a particular child. And we hope to make sure that such a mentor will spend at least 1 hour each week with the child who is the mentor's mentee, and in that 1 hour, the child will get all the attention that he or she needs, which attention they are not getting in the course of the normal life of the institution. And we also have summer camp programs, and once they are enrolled into a camp, we promise them to be able to attend the camp all through their life. So until the age of 18, we receive them as campers each summer, and after the age of 18, they work as counselors. They are provided education to become counselors, and it is working in their lives as the grandparents' home in the life of more fortunate children, so they can return there every summer, and this is a safe haven and a safe point, a reliable point in this very fast-changing environment. And most importantly, when these children reach the age of 18, they have the opportunity to attend aftercare, but they can only continue attending these programs if they are employed or have been enrolled into some kind of a higher educational course. Of course, at the age of 18, I was faced with the same dilemma, and if I had to do the two together, which is the case with most children being brought up in care institutions, well, it would have been a great challenge for me, but let me stress that most children fall out or drop out of the system at the age of 14. And unfortunately, the labor market is something that is very far for them. It's not part of their everyday lives. They don't have the model in the family, so they don't know what it looks like when the mother and the father go off to work every morning, or they have no idea how a family budget is earned. So the labor market is something that is very far detached from them. So our mentorship program is changing into a different format in the case of these individuals. It's called the Mentorship Plus program, which is providing assistance to these young individuals in the everyday difficulties of life, because 90% of these young people do not have any identification document or any official document. And they have no experience concerning how to go into a government office and apply for such a document, which of course is absolutely fundamentally necessary for people if they want to take up a job. So all our programs that we provide to these young individuals from the age of 0 to the age of 18, all these programs are intended to serve one single purpose. On the one hand, one aspect of this single purpose is to give them a good childhood so that they can discover and explore all the great aspects of their individuality that they have. But in addition to this, they also have a place where they can rely on, and they have a relationship of love in their lives, maybe several such relationships, which love relationship, as we all know, is a fundamental precondition for every person to be integrated into society. Thank you very much for this insight into the programs of the Word, Beauty of the Word Foundation, and as we have understood, it is very helpful. Their activities are very helpful to allow children to gain self-confidence. Now, we have arrived at the climate crisis panel, and we remember there was a project in 2019 where the 5,200 interviewee children expressed their concerns about climate change and their fear of never getting a job, or their fear of wars and terrorist attacks. So this happened in 2019, and we thought that this interview will be repeated soon. And perhaps two more points. In the autumn of 2024, 14 Hungarian recognized experts drew up a list of points concerning the current knowledge of climate science and what needs to be done for a more livable future. And under UNICEF Hungary, 100 young people also identified a number of climate policy goals, which they handed over to the government, so that before the COP29 climate summit, their opinion be also mainstreamed into the topic of the conference. So Ágnes will be our expert introducing this topic. She is a political scientist, a lawyer, and an expert on children's rights, and has been a research fellow at a foundation and since 2023 an associate professor of ELTE University, a recipient of the Boy I Write, and a key expert on human rights, including most particularly children's rights. And she has held many positions from the Commissioner's Office for Fundamental Rights to the UNICEF Hungarian Committee, and for several years she has worked as a coordinator of the NGO Coalition on Human Rights. So I think she deserves a huge hand for all her accomplishments. The coalition will celebrate its 10th anniversary next year, and this is also down to the hard work of Ági. Let me ask you if we will receive an answer to whether the UN Children's Rights Convention helped our actions on climate change, and whether we have seen any mindset change, although Hungary refused to accept the third supplementary protocol, meaning that children cannot file a complaint with the Children's Committee of the United Nations in matters of climate. So Erika raised more questions that I originally intended to answer, but before I start answering all these questions, let me refer to what Sanyi said, because he had a quote from a young individual, and it was telling a lot. And Erika mentioned in her introduction that the complaints mechanism is not available in Hungary because Hungary refused to join that or adopt that. And you remember the quote that Sanyi shared with us. The young person said, "Nothing is going to change. Even if we are right, we are not being listened to."
So there's this legal tool that is supported by many countries, which sends the message that it makes sense to turn to the Child Rights Committee of the United Nations. And well, we have child participation in our panel, and I was very pleased to see that. And well, I think climate change is an intersection for us. It rests both of us. So if there is such a tool, a legal tool that can support the empowerment of children, where they can contact the committee directly, and then Hungary decides not to ratify this protocol. That Hungary is not the only country, but we still have not joined this protocol, and it prevents our children from accessing legal remedy in line with their rights to a healthy environment, because their right to a healthy environment is clearly violated. And 35 years ago, this Convention on the Right of the Child was adopted, and well, we should observe the rights to children, the right to children to health and to development. And this country, Hungary, joined the convention itself very early. So it is good that we joined this convention among the first signatories 35 years ago, and it is a universal convention on child protection. But we haven't signed this protocol, complaint protocol, and this convention was the only convention where subjects could not contact the committee directly for the Committee on the Rights of Women. You had this direct recourse, but this was the only committee where this protocol was adopted at a very late stage. So it was a major gesture from the United Nations. And while we still don't have a direct contact to the committee, despite the convention saying that the children have fundamental rights just because they were born. And for climate change, in terms of climate change, it would be especially important to provide this direct recourse to legal remedy. So, and let me refer back to something I was thinking a lot how to involve intersectionality in my presentation. In 2013, the Hungarian Ombudsman had a survey about the right to a healthy environment for for children, and it was the last such green survey conducted on a sample of children. And this survey highlighted the same, that how we can provide this right to a healthy environment if there is no lighting at home, if the walls are damp, and if the child lives in a damp environment, if there is mold on the walls, and it is directly related to that vulnerability and their ability to exercise their rights. And I usually start my presentations with Greta Thunberg. So she is on the first picture, because it is very interesting that this topic, which mobilized young people on a global scale, that they protested in the streets, masses of young people, and it is a generational issue. And child poverty, it is different from child poverty, and it is different for violence against children, which are also global phenomena. They are present everywhere in the world. But the climate crisis was a subject or a case that young people can fully identify with, regardless of the continent they live on. They go to the street, they protest. In 2019, Greta Thunberg delivered a speech in the UN. It was the famous "How Dare You" speech by Greta. How you dare to waste our future, how you dare not to reduce emissions. And Erika mentioned lawsuits. So there were lawsuits based on the violation of children's rights, and I will refer to them in my presentation briefly. Well, here my next slide is about this convention, that it includes some guarantees related to climate change, that states have to make active effort. So the convention mentions this right to health, to the highest level of health. But, well, this is not a green convention, but these rights are clearly identified in the convention. And why should we use this child's right argumentation in such lawsuits? In the United States, they had state litigation related to climate change initiated by young people because they violate their right to life, their right to participate, their right to participate in Aboriginal culture. So these rights included in the Convention on the Right of the Child, they are used as reference in litigation for on climate change. And Greta Thunberg said that how dare you steal our future, because our generation realize that we are cheated. We feel to be cheated, that you didn't do anything. You stick to business as usual, and you only do as much as absolutely necessary because there is no real change. So the generation who can initiate lawsuits now, they can base their lawsuits on children's rights because they are not adults yet. Because in international law, there is no other definition that they can use to initiate lawsuit. So this is why the children's rights argumentation seems to be effective, because this Convention on Children's Rights covers hundreds of countries all over the world. Well, it is funny that now we have a new president in the U.S. who is climate skeptical. So it would be better if, if things were different, but they are not. And the U.S. is also one of the largest emitters in the world. But, well, based on this Convention on Children's Rights, you can initiate lawsuits at the court in Strasbourg, and child right-based argumentation can be used in such lawsuits, and it can be used as a point of reference because the rights and interests of future generations are very difficult to be used as a legal basis. As I mentioned, the right to a healthy environment is not directly indicated in the convention, but it is related to the goal to eliminate famine and other environment-related goals. If you check UNICEF statistics, when we say that 30% of the world's population is younger than 18, so the world's population is young, and they are strongly affected by these issues. And we have, in every second, we have children younger than 5 dying for reasons that can be prevented. And it hasn't changed because the access to safe drinking water is still an issue because drought periods, dry periods are increasingly frequent. Children are more and more exposed to infectious diseases that are spreading as a result of climate change. So there are many such cases and causes that affect this population of people younger than 18, and this is a global generational issue. So it is an issue everybody can identify with, all young people can identify with. There was a major achievement in soft law that the United Nations CRC accepted the general comment on the right to a healthy environment, and it was developed with child participation. The child's opinion was integrated in this comment, and this comment reinforced that the climate crisis is also a child crisis. So you can use child's rights as a point of reference in climate change litigation. So it made the two topics closely interrelated. And, well, I have a few pictures about climate activism, that it is not characteristic only to developed Western world, to the white youth, because it is everywhere. These initiatives are mushrooming in all parts of the world. Children want to make their voice heard. The Greta Thunberg and Friday strikes had a major role in this movement, and there is the climate summit where children were also involved. And well, I don't know whether it was just for the shop window or whether it is a meaningful involvement. And I have two last sentences to add, and then I will start a dialogue with Nori. That here slide is about the rights of future generations, and we don't know who are the members of different generations, and are those who live at the same time belong to the same generation, or an expectant mother is part of the generation with the baby because the baby is not born yet, and if the baby is not born, whether we can represent the interest of unborn babies. So it is very difficult to make these definitions, these legal definitions, and the courts have very different responses to such cases. In Strasbourg, climate seniors, so that climate seniors filed a petition because their right to family life was violated, and they won. And they referred to the interests of future generation. And then the Duarte case that was filed by young people at the same time that was rejected. So on the same day, the same court passed two different decisions on the same subjects. So if when we have tools related to environmental law, it seems that the children's rights as a more effective point of reference in litigation, and we have to take it seriously. The Hungarian ombudsman, who he is the designated person responsible for children's rights. And I think I would be interested to know whether they can implement this complaint management mechanism, so they can open the door as an ombudsman and say that my door is open, you can come and contact me if you feel that your rights to a healthy environment is violated. So we still have tools even until the protocol is signed by Hungary. So these tools are available, and to just as Greta Thunberg, to how dare you not to use these tools and promote the use of these tools. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. And now that the opening presentations are over, I'd like to ask you to reflect on each other's presentation. I would like to invite Nori to make her remarks, and those in the audience, please feel free to ask your questions or make your remarks and comments. Please contribute to what we have just heard. Well, let me add something to the last presentation. I find it very disappointing that so few measures have been taken against climate change, against the climate crisis, and my rights are not promoted by this, because if I feel concerned, if I feel anxious, then my brain, my mind will not develop in a healthy way if I'm too concerned or worried about things like climate change. Let me share a personal remark related to the presentation by Ágnes Kende and the research she mentioned. On my father's side, I have Roma relatives, so I call myself Gypsy and not Roma, because this is how we use it in my family. And when I was in the kindergarten and I went to primary school, I was also diagnosed for a special school. And somehow, in some way, I think my mom intervened, and she achieved that I was sent to an ordinary school, to a non-special school. But I can't remember really. But well, both my mom and dad were not educated, and I always had problem with foreign words in primary school. I still remember, I didn't know how to pronounce words. There were brands, international brand names that I didn't know how to pronounce, while my classmates knew how to pronounce them, because we didn't use that brand at home. I never heard it, and I still remember that I was afraid, and I felt unprivileged compared to my classmate. This is what I wanted to add, a personal remark to misdiagnosis or wrong diagnosis. I don't know how to respond, because this is a very nice story, and it is very good that we have you in this panel. And well, the beginning of your story was your diagnosis for a special school. So I just think what you wanted to say with this story is that in an integrated environment, if you came from a different background, you had negative feelings, you were frustrated, but your life shows that you were better off in this integrated environment, as if you were sent to a special school. But I don't want to interpret your life story, of course. Just one sentence to it. So it was integration rather than inclusion, and I have to fight many challenges, and I had to learn how to speak English. Well, I have good memories and bad memories from my childhood, like every child has. Well, I was not assisted or supported by anyone at school. Thank you. I'm Borbála Juhász from the Hungarian Women Lobby, and we are proud members of the NGO Coalition on Children's Rights. And thank you for inviting me to this conference. I learned a lot, and I wish you lots of success, many donors and funded. And well, I now feel the urge to participate in the work of Világszép Foundation as a volunteer. My question to Ági about your research, did you have data broken down by gender? Do you know how many girls and boys have been diagnosed with special education need? As far as I know, the statistical office collects this data in a gender breakdown. I think Ondi has a better answer. We didn't have any data broken down. The data we had available was an estimate from school directors or principals. They gave said estimates like they thought that 30% of their pupils were Roma, and I've never seen such a gender breakdown for this data, but it may be my fault. Well, we didn't have any gender breakdown because I think the educational office, the central educational office, has such a breakdown. So I don't know whether I can access this data for disadvantaged children or severely disadvantaged children. No such breakdown is available, so no gender breakdown is available for the data on children with in disadvantaged situation.
Thank you for your lectures. As a lawyer and a person with disability, and also as a mom of a person with disability, both of us autistic and ADHD, just to put in context, and also focus on policy, I think it's our duty to think about not using, for example, terms as special education, and I think accessible education in those terms. Because sometimes, and it's just sharing some empathy with Sándor, I've lived and my son has lived, but it's the judgment of not raising the same levels as everyone else in the times everyone was expected. And I do think also thinking about the child who is in there, that maybe because those expectancies have a time lapse or a time gap, that teachers, professionals, adults want to reach you out at some point, puts you in so much pressure and affects mental health and affects development, and also to raise out. I even don't like the word development because at my point is that's also ableist, you know. So I was just sharing this reflection of maybe our way should be to go further. And going further would be, why do I still speak about special education and not even inclusive education, accessible education? That's what I would like to share with you as a reflection of all what you have heard.
Welcome, my name is Judith Gellért, representing the PNL Foundation, which is an international NGO dedicated to encouraging business for-profit law firms to provide assistance to NGOs without charging a fee, which NGOs provide assistance to children. And one of our priorities is climate protection, and the other is children's rights. And you have just mentioned this case at the Strasbourg court, where the court empowered or authorized NGOs to turn to the courts on climate matters, which means that even in the Hungarian legal remedy system, new procedural right opportunities have been opened for the purposes of these NGOs so that they can use this. So my question is whether there are initiatives in Hungary dedicated to informing children of the new rights that they have so that they can organize themselves and sue certain authorities, first at or with the Hungarian courts, and then perhaps in the second step to turn to the court in Strasbourg. So this is my first question. And the second question I have is whether you have launched initiatives on informing children about the rights that they have under the Children's Right Convention, and how they can not only be the owners of these rights, but how they can actively participate in implementing them. Often we believe that we adults, the lawyers, we know everything better than the children. But how can we empower children so that they can exercise these rights and become active participants in the enforcement of their rights or the implementation of their rights or in their own advocacy? So I'm asking this question right now for a reason, because we are currently witnessing that children have become very active in terms of protection against climate change, because what is on the line is primarily their future. Yes, thank you for this question. And adults, or in other words, decision makers, who I have in mind in the first place, tend to not wish to push their business interest in the background. So say battery factories are built in Hungary and in other countries, knowing that they are going to generate a huge profit with no attention paid to the environmental impact, which is detrimental and which will be felt by the children in the first place. So that lawyers know best is a general attitude. I apologize for saying this in this beautiful hall where the future lawyers are being educated, but still we are talking of access to justice and prevention of victimhood. And what my point is related to this general point of the conference, that is access to justice, that people don't know how to use these rights. Even lawyers can be blamed for the same. The Hungarian Supreme Court, the Hungarian Curia, adopted a decision whereby it is clearly confirmed that children have the right to access the justice system, but nobody knows how. Not even the specialists, the lawyers, have that kind of practical knowledge. So such pragmatic competence is missing in society. So we have normal, everyday children's rights issues that are emerging in our daily lives, and we adults are incapable of providing the adequate responses to these challenges. It's a huge challenge, and I am highly skeptical in this regard as to whether we will be able to change this if over the past 35 years we have not managed to make progress. So I'm not aware of any positive practices or policies intended to empower children concerning the rights that they have. Somebody mentioned the Ombudsman, which is my favorite institution. And I am not so sure that they can do a good job in that regard, although they are, of course, closer to citizens, but they at the same time also have a great prestige in Hungarian society. And in other countries, this institution is working very well. And children are seated at the same table of negotiation. So I think there is a space where we could develop this system further, but it is not happening in Hungary. So let's say we have a panel of experts and it is their firm opinion that the child at hand is not having any learning difficulties, but still they are not able to take advantage of the rights that children have. And we have had this convention having been transposed into the Hungarian legal system. The convention adopted 35 years ago, but in spite of this long time span, we have not learned how to implement these rights. Yes, I raise this question right now because I am absolutely certain that the climate crisis has been able to reach out to children or to influence the thinking of children in a way that we have not seen any other phenomenon influencing them. So in this context, we enjoy a huge opportunity to hand down information and knowledge to children in an unprecedented way. And the Strasbourg court turned down the arguments brought forth by children in a way that I can only call sad. And this is also a conference of the Coalition of NGOs on Children's Rights. So I think it is absolutely the right place for us to discuss how to mobilize Hungarian society as well, because we are enjoying a great momentum at the moment. And we could perhaps also join other international initiatives, which might be the easiest way to go forward on this. Professor Orsolya Siebert, thank you. I only have one thought to share with you now that you are mentioning the rulings of the Supreme Court. Of course, I am not a competent person because I am not working there, but I did a great deal of research into these rulings concerning family law and the placement of children. And a great deal of referencing is made to the Convention on Children's Rights, but my conclusion has been that it is lacking the sufficient depth. So you have these iterations. Yes, we are aware of the Convention and that the children's best interest or the most important interest the law students are happy to quote these parts of the rulings in their essays, pointing to the Supreme Court doing a good job. But in fact, they are not, because these are just quotes that are sort of inserts into the texts of the rulings. And before the lunchtime, it is an ungrateful task to say more, but it was a case at the Strasbourg court roughly 10 years ago, the Neulinger case, in which case the court in Strasbourg clearly pointed to the fact that the Hague Convention on Children's Rights is not in harmony with the rest of the institutions thinking about the rights of children. And in every case when the children are unlawfully taken away, a very thorough analysis should be conducted into how such an unlawful action has happened. And the lawyer community across Europe criticized them for this, and they said that the court was stupid, they were not properly aware of what the international private law institution is about. And after this very negative response, the court in Strasbourg became a lot more careful and cautious when it came to the need to speak out against such practices. And it appears to me that they have become reluctant to adopt a firmer stance on these issues. You did, but I want to tell you is that I am absolutely in favor of what you have raised, so that this becomes more general, as a more general effort, maybe because of the climate crisis. But, you know, we should be real. We can clearly see that even the opinion of adults is not taken into consideration under the present circumstances. And this is not conducive, obviously, to the participation of children. So the general thinking today is that children are ignored. Nobody cares or bothers about what they think, and we know this, who have been working in this profession for decades, and we have not seen any breakthrough point in this. And whether we have, a climate crisis or whether we do not, we need a more overarching solution here. I'm not trying to mobilize you, although I would love to, but it appears now that the world is not on our side. It appears that we are turning back on the path that we have started to walk on. So I suggest that in our more restricted community of those who are focusing on children's rights, we should try to come up with a plan to reduce the harm over the next years, even though in spite of the fact that we should need to do more, but that's what we have to restrict ourselves to. So we need to identify the chances and the opportunities that we have, and at least try to reduce the harm. So certainly this is an area of law which needs to be developed, and the courts will have an important role to play here, so that the European Convention on Human Rights should be interpreted in such a way that environmental rights and climate crisis-related issues should also be taken into consideration. And then we have the right to appropriate health and the right to life, and which of course can be interpreted in such a way that the protection against the climate crisis should also be intensified. So I think our public discourse benefited from these exchanges of ideas. I thank you all very much for your efforts, and we will now have a lunch break until 1:30.